headlines, sorting through the media bias, exposing the propaganda, and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee, this is your host, Tim Tapp. Definitely feeling a bit under the weather, but there's just flat out too much stuff going on not to do a broadcast, especially since I have not been on earlier in the week. And like I said, there's just way too much stuff going on. Comments need to be made. Points need to be made. Focus must be brought forth. But today, rather than focus a great deal exclusively on politics, we're going to go over some major stories that have political ramifications that are a bit less direct. I mean, it's easy enough to point a finger and say directly at, this is obviously this, here's your connection. But there are political movements underfoot, and there are ways of connecting the dots, so to speak. The way the liberals, the way the so-called progressives are able to really infiltrate your brain and make you think that they're the smartest people in the room, and the way to make you think that it's only being compassionate to think the way they do is by using individual cases. The statement's been made a multitude of times that all politics are local. The reason that statement is made is because it's your personal experiences that are going to influence the way you as an individual look at any particular statement or situation. The main topic that we're going to get onto is, of course, the tragic story of Christopher Lane, a promising young man who was gunned down simply because 3 teenagers felt that they were bored and that killing someone would just be fun. Now, that in and of itself is a tragic statement, but there are other tragic things going on, and we're going to take them on one by one. First of all, reported just this last Sunday on the Blog Talk version of Tap Into the Truth, about the upcoming trial, well, not trial so much as court date, I should say, that would be more accurate, of Caitlin Hunt. Now, for those of you who don't recognize the name right off, Miss Caitlin Hunt happens to be the now 19, then 18-year-old young lady who has carried on a sexual relationship with a 14-year-old basketball teammate at her former high school. Well, the reason she had an upcoming court date was because the prosecutors in the case had filed papers that she had broken the no-contact order. Well, we went into some detail and some in-depth at the last week's show. And at the end of this show, I will put a direct link back to last Sunday's show from the Blog Talk version if you want to go back and check out some of the details that were reported then. But among the situation, she did have a brand new plea deal on the table that had been offered to her just last Thursday. This was obviously before they found out and had indisputable evidence that Miss Hunt had indeed been violating the terms of her release. She had left a iPod in the young 14-year-old girl's locker on the last day that she actually was able to attend said high school. In the process, she used that iPod to send text messages, to send lewd photos, to send explicit videos, and to arrange meetings where the two of them still managed to sneak off and spend personal time together. Well, as of last Monday, which would have been the last time I would have preferred to have been on the air but was unable to get here, the new plea deal that involved a specific amount of community service along with 2 years of probation was taken off the table. No word on whether or not she was leaning towards accepting that deal or not. She had already turned down flat 2 years house arrest to be followed with probation. She flat out turned that down. But as it turns out, not only did she have contact with the girl in question, but so too did her mother. It is absolutely mind-boggling that someone would be so disrespectful. Ignore a court's order when it comes to no contact with someone if you're trying to maintain both A, your innocence, and B, your freedom. Well, her court date this past Tuesday, which was just yesterday, today being August the 21st, 2013. She was in court yesterday, and the judge hearing the case indeed revoked her freedom. Miss Hunt is now sitting in jail with a large bond placed on her future release. She probably will be spending her time in jail until the actual trial. And now, without the plea deal on the table, she may very well face 15 years in prison, which is the maximum sentence permitted. And she probably will get the maximum at this point because she has used up her goodwill with the court. She has, in fact, thumbed her nose at 2 different judges who have placed these orders. Now, how does this affect politics? Here's the rub. She has become a poster child for the gay and lesbian community. Early on, she was simply being accused of being targeted because she was gay. They were using the statutory rape laws in the state of Florida to victimize an individual whose only crime was becoming intimate with someone that she already spent a great deal of time with. Now, and I have to admit, I know oftentimes you've probably gotten the feel from things I've said and done on this show and on some of my writing, I don't have a problem with the gay and lesbian community. I think they'll have to answer for what they've done when it comes time to do all that. But as far as what they do, I'm more libertarian when it comes to their lifestyles because it's none of my business. And that's the way I look at it. That's the way I feel about it. And I did actually have a certain amount of sympathy for Miss Hunt in the early going. I did. I thought that she maybe was a bit of a victim. Because the fact that she had turned 18, she was still in high school. She was still on the basketball team. She still spent time with... So her maturity level, for whatever reason, is not the same as you would expect. For this, it was no different than if she was still 17. And in fact, you can't honestly tell me that there wasn't some interaction between the two before she turned 18. So I had a certain amount of sympathy for her. And the fact that she became the poster child for the gay and lesbian community on this, see what oppressive laws are doing. But that still doesn't excuse the behavior since she knowingly and willfully ignored the court order, knowingly and willfully on multiple occasions, not only sent explicit material to this girl, continuing to lead her down the road and path, met with her several times, continued to have sex with her several times, continuing to break the law that she was already in trouble for breaking. The gay and lesbian community wanted to use this case to help them. This was part of the spin. She made appearances on MSNBC. She made appearances at the Gay Pride Parade in New York City. She was becoming a poster child to help move this forward. And now, she has probably used up all the goodwill she had from all of these groups and set that movement back by no longer just being the martyr who falls on the sword and say, hey, this is what's going on, but by willfully and spitefully ignoring the law and ignoring the fact that You can't be a victim if you're just being stubborn. Proving that she's not an adult yet, but more a spoiled brat. Like I said, if you want to get more of the details on the case, of course you can always look it up on your own. Plenty of sources of information. This is still making news. But I will put a link to last Sunday's Blog Talk version of Tap Into the Truth if you'd like to check that out as well. Also, bombshell news. How does this play into politics? Let's find out. Big breaking news today. The family of James DiMaggio are now out there saying that they think that James was the father of the 16-year-old girl that he kidnapped and of the 8-year-old boy, the girl's brother, that was left behind with their mother in the burning house. Relatives are requesting a paternity test to positively match DiMaggio, suspected of kidnapping and murder. I don't know how you continue to say suspected of. I think it was pretty obvious that he did it at this point. But, suspect, allegedly, blah, 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 legal doublespeak, whatever. If it keeps you out of trouble, fine. But at any rate, the family is requesting that DNA samples from Hannah and anything that they can get from Ethan be taken and used to perform a paternity test. DiMaggio, who was 40, killed during the shootout on August the 10th in Idaho, where he had taken Hannah after leaving the brother and mother behind. This is frightening because here again plays into the realm of politics. This almost bringing that militant feminist ideology back into the family court system, because this is a guy, if he was the father and knew it, then what we have here is a case of a non-custodial parent kidnapping and performing acts of violence. Once again, we're having somebody play into this picture of, the men are just stupid and can't play by the rules and do mean and violent things. This caricature of men that's been painted in this country that just continues to get worse and worse. It certainly would be a new twist, certainly newsworthy that this allegation's even being made. But what does it mean towards the extent of everything and everybody else that's involved in this case? It's frightening that this could have happened. No one can make sense of why a family friend would have done these things. But suddenly, there seems to be some logical rationale of how his mindset could have been twisted and turned into performing this act. Really? This still doesn't make sense. If you know you're the father, why not just go the legal route? Doesn't paint the picture, does it? Was this guy just off his rocker? What's going on here? These are the questions that are going to be raised, and I promise you, as a result, you're going to see some folks on the left start putting into place laws where they're going to want to make mandatory paternal testing at birth. And you're also going to start seeing these folks on the left start trying to put into place even more restrictions on non-custodial parents, further attacking parental legal rights. That's how this plays into the realm of the politic. Because it's individual cases and small-time politicians that first start making these major policy changes. Don't be surprised and don't doubt me where that is headed. Also, another big-time bit of headline breaking news today. Bradley Manning, the private first class who turned over a lot of military files to WikiLeaks was sentenced today, and he's getting 35 years in prison. If you think that's a bit excessive, consider the alternative. He very well could have been put in front of a firing squad for this particular act that could have been extended to treason. And the bottom line was, this guy handed over a massive amount of sensitive government information. Now, is that in and of itself a crime? Yes, it is. Should it be? Is another question. The amount of information and what specifically is in it, in my mind, should determine whether or not it's a crime. It shouldn't just automatically be one. But Mr. Manning was also under a second set of standards for his code of conduct, and that's the military code of conduct. And this was a gross breach of that. Is he a hero? To some, he is. He stood up, he made a stand, he took things that he thought needed to be made public, and he put it out there. These documents that were turned over detailed the inner workings, according to some, of the U.S.'s efforts, their military actions, everything that was going on in Iraq and Afghanistan, primarily under the Bush regime. Sadly, Mr. Bradley Manning, Private Bradley Manning, is no longer private first class. He was busted down. Wasn't allowed to make a statement when the sentence was handed out. He wasn't allowed to spend any time in front of the cameras. He barely had any time to step forward and make a statement of any kind towards even receiving a statement. That's more what I mean. Some folks in the crowd yelled out, "We'll be fighting for you, Bradley." Obviously, they think that this man did the world a service by revealing this information. Manning was dishonorably discharged. Like I'd already said, demoted from the rank of private first class down to just private. He was ordered to forfeit all pay and benefits, which means his military service has been for nothing now, at least as far as anything that he could have gained from it later. Now, Manning was convicted back in July 30th, and he was convicted on 19 counts, including 6 Espionage Act violations, for what was basically his role in the largest leak of classified information in U.S. history, at least any that's been publicly acknowledged anyway. The charge carries a maximum sentence of 90 years, and the prosecution had requested Manning serve 60. His sentence brings to a close a 3-year saga, which he endured 9 months in solitary confinement and saw himself transformed into a symbol of one individual's potential in the internet age to roll the world's sole superpower. He will most likely serve out his sentence in the United States disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. But regardless of where he spends his time, and regardless of whether or not he can get enough credits for good behavior, which is what happens in the military service, if he becomes eligible for parole in about 8 years, that means the earliest he's going to see freedom again is at age 33. Bottom line is, most likely it'll be 35 years that he's going to spend in there. Basically, the decision has done more damage to the American Constitution than all of the disclosures put together did to any other kind of American interest. I don't see this man as a hero, but what he exposed was unconstitutional activities being taken place, much the same as the supposed documents that have been released by Edward Snowden. Now, I don't necessarily think everything's completely on the up and up with Mr. Snowden, but that is neither here nor there. Right now, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we will also address the issue of the Georgia school shooting, and then we'll get to the main topic, the tragic story of Christopher Lane. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog post and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We are back. Thanks for staying with us through the break. And we are still talking on a couple of more topics before we really finish things today. But do want to remind you, just like we said, be sure to check us out at tapintothetruth.com. I just added a couple of more videos today, including finally getting around to putting the Ashton Kutcher video up. His appearance at the Teen Choice Awards and the speech he gave, not only seeming out of character for everything we've seen about Ashton Kutcher, but also, just a great freaking message that kids today obviously need to have, especially considering that we have teenagers running around these days that seem to think it's okay to kill somebody when they get bored. Anyway, as I captioned that particular video on the page, it's on the homepage, by the way, basically said, never thought Ashton Kutcher would have a video on my website, but there it is. Now, enough of the levity. Let's get back to today's topics. And the next topic is the Georgia school shooting. Now, I have not, and intentionally so, listened to the folks that typically hit the conspiracy theory levels. And I did so on purpose because I wanted a fresh perspective. I wanted to see what my impressions were in comparison to what they had to say, so I could get it out on the record before I actually listened in. Because here's what is really odd about this. This guy, Michael Hill, came into a school, supposedly slipped by security, which, I heard somebody actually make that statement on a news report this morning. Apparently slipped by security. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what's the alternative? Getting high fives from security as he goes roaming by? Hey, all right, nice gun. Come on in. We like it. What's in the backpack? I don't know. It just seems odd. But then there's these great accolades for this office worker who managed to keep him inside the building after he realized the kids had been slipped out Then there's an exchange of gunfire with the police in which nobody's hit, nobody's shot, nobody's injured. This office worker herself is actually within a few feet of this guy. They're talking back and forth. He never aims at her. And then conveniently, he acknowledges that he's been off his medication and probably should have went to a hospital. Also, I find it very convenient that he had taken pictures of himself previously with this AK-47 style rifle. And, they keep talking about how he had packaged up nearly 500 rounds of ammunition. Enough to shoot more than half the school's students, as it's being reported in certain, left-leaning news sites, we'll call them. Now, most people, I think, could do the math on their own. Yes, if you have 500 rounds of ammunition and roughly about 1,000 students there, yes, you ought to be able to get about half of them. But they wanted to make sure that you got the point, how dangerous this could have been. How dangerous this could have been. Was this for real? Was this another false flag? Does this tie to Sandy Hook? Is this any of that? I don't know. I mean, I still have mixed feelings on what a lot of these folks who've come up with some very compelling information in regards to Sandy Hook. Again, don't get me wrong, not saying I'm buying into that being a false flag, because I don't know what would be worse, quite honestly. The fact that some psycho who had access to weapons after he stole some from someone who legally had them decides that it's a good idea to go shoot up a school, or that we have a government that would be willing to stage such an event, real or not, just to try to make a point and to further attack the Constitution. But here's what I do know, and here's how this story, along with the others, ties into my theme of politics being local. Only in this case, this is a national push one more time. This will be used again as an attempt to garner more gun control. But, in case you haven't noticed a pattern, they're not coming headlong at gun control anymore. They're trying to talk a lot about how we treat our mentally ill. In fact, they're making no bones about talking about how disturbed this individual really has been. Even the woman whose family once took in the suspect in an Atlanta area school shooting, how they knew even when he was younger that he was mentally ill, but he had never been violent then. This is still out of character. Why do they keep making this point, ladies and gentlemen? Well, it's obvious. Because it's the same thing that happened immediately after Sandy Hook. There were two things that were discussed. Discussion number one was direct gun control. They were hoping they could get enough of an emotional stir and enough of a knee-jerk reaction that every single person in the country would be willing to voluntarily lay down their arms, saying, "Please, Mr. Occupier, come take our guns. We'll give them to Eric Holder," probably just so he can send them to Mexico, but we'll give them to Eric Holder so that our children can be safe, the Constitution be damned. And sadly enough, in the weeks immediately following, there were a lot of folks that were willing to do just that. Folks that were traditionally proponents of the Second Amendment. Folks who were traditionally into conservation and hunting. Folks that were traditionally people you could count on to stand up and say, "Over my dead body. You can pry my gun out of my cold, dead hand." But there was something about seeing the images of these children, which actually we never saw images of children, by the way. Something else, the tinfoil hat crowd, as some folks like to call them. And I feel like it's okay for me to say that because I'll admit it, I've got a few tinfoil hats of my own. It's not a fashion statement, ladies and gentlemen. It's the fact that I know our government can't be trusted. And it's been that way for some time. As far as which conspiracy theories I buy into and don't, I could do a series of shows on that, and there's no time to get into that right now. But just the very thought of all these little kids being killed by a guy who just needed his medication, it affects people, especially parents. If you are the parent of a child, that is going to get in your head. You can't help it. But it's knee-jerk reactions like that that cause the worst kind of situation. But there was a second prong to that attack, and that second prong was the mentally ill. We have to take another look at how we treat the mentally ill. We have to, number one, continue to be compassionate, to better recognize, but we need to take more steps in how we recognize them. We need to get more aggressive in forcing treatment on them. I don't know if you're paying attention, but I was. I heard those statements coming forth. And here's something else to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen. Despite all the arguments, the fighting, the complaining, the discussions, Obamacare is still coming. Under Obamacare, they have the right to send government officials to your house to check on your children, to diagnose them. If they find something wrong, promise you they'll take them. They have the rights, they're required, your new government employee / physician, required to ask you questions about your gun ownership. You want to tell me that it's not going to be really tempting for someone who wants to take your guns not to say, you know what? Based on the information we've collected, we've found you to be mentally incompetent. And under a new slew of rules, laws, and regulations, I promise you, Mr. and Mrs. American gun owner, they make that determination, they'll find a legal excuse if they don't pass whole new laws specifically for the purpose to take your right to own and bear arms from you once you are declared mentally incompetent. That's how this ties in as well. It's one more way of them standing up and very reasonably explaining to the people how this makes sense, why we have to do it. We've already seen it now time and time again. One major tragedy still just a little while ago, still fresh in our memory, and now another tragedy narrowly averted. Now, I don't know how legitimate this or the other was. I wasn't there. But what I do know is there is no question, there is no doubt that some politician somewhere is going to try to use this to further their agenda. That you can count on. And now, with only about 10 minutes or so left, we've really got to hit on this last story because this is really was supposed to be the main story of the day. And there's a lot to go over here. Christopher Lang. I mean, here he is visiting the United States. And he's an Australian baseball player. He was out for a jog in an Oklahoma neighborhood. And he was shot in the back by 3 teenagers. 3 black teenagers. By the way, this is black on white crime. Where's the outrage? Where's Jesse Jackson? Where's our illustrious occupier of the White House? I mean, Trayvon Martin could have been his son. At the very least, Christopher Lang could have been his creepy-ass cracker cousin. Right? Where's it at? Instead, the biggest news coming out of the White House is now the anointed one, the occupier, has decided he's getting involved in the fight to help protect pit bulls. Now, I've got kind of mixed feelings on that for my own personal reasons. But we're talking about 3 kids, young as they are, who got bored. And they randomly chose somebody to just shoot. They just shot him in the back. No regard to who it was. I mean, violence with purpose is bad enough in the United States. If Christopher Lane had been a gangbanger, or if he had been a drug dealer, if he had been somebody out here doing just crazy crap, where you could somehow justify some level of involvement in him being a target, that would be bad enough. The fact that teenagers have access to the type of firepower that we're talking about, because while we're talking about the constitutional right to own and bear arms, that is still restricted to adults. And most states set that level of adulthood for gun ownership at 21, the same as drinking alcohol, instead of 18. Is that a case of it being rightfully so or not? I don't know. I mean, you have 2 separate scenarios to choose from. You have the kids that grew up in a household where guns were a part of the household activities, where the parents taught them proper respect, proper use, proper cleaning, proper everything. They know firearms. And strangely enough, you don't often see those kids involved with gun crimes, even though they have free access to firearms. You don't see those kids out here doing this stupid crap. But this has caused an international event. You've got Australian politicians now that are calling for a boycott of Australian tourists of any kind to come to the United States. Should that be the case? Well, it's hard to really argue against it. Tim Fisher, who served as Deputy Prime Minister under John Howard from 1996 until 1999, is now urging all Australians not to travel to the United States. He said that such a boycott would send a message about the need for tighter gun control regulations in the United States. Just FYI, Australia has had very strict gun control laws for a while now. But what these gun control advocates will not tell you is that the incidence of violent crime has shot up considerably. Now, they'll throw out to you the very spun statistic of gun violence having dropped. And that's true. But here's the thing. Australia started as a prison colony, right? And other than some of the outside rural areas, Australia really didn't have a whole lot of gun ownership going on to start with. So when they started banning the sales and they started gun control across the board, it was pretty well effective at maintaining the number of weapons that were available, at least in the inner city areas. But what they don't want to tell you, what they hate to tell you, is that once the more violent people figured out that there's not a chance that you have a gun to defend yourself, violent attacks upon people's persons involving knives, blunt objects, and just plain old physical brute force pounding you with their fist shot up in most areas of the continent/country of Australia. But you see, the gun control folks still have control. And now they want to boycott us because 3 teenagers, 3 people who were bored and somehow thought it would be fun to go shoot somebody in the back, decided to go for a ride. And it just so happened that this individual happened to be the person jogging by at the time. He was shot in the back while he was jogging, minding his own business. He went out for a jog about 3 p.m. It was a country club road in Duncan, Oklahoma. He was found face down, shot with what they thought to be a small caliber revolver bullet in his lower back. The teens who killed him said they were bored. There was 3 of them. They've been arrested. James Edwards, 15. Chancey, baby Drake, Luna, 16. And Michael Jones, 17. Edwards and Luna, they were charged with first-degree murder. Jones has been named as an accessory. I still can't get over the fact that they actually admitted to the fact. They told the police once they were picked up, we were bored. We decided to kill somebody for the fun of it. This is a guy who was visiting his girlfriend in Duncan. Christopher Lane was in Duncan, Oklahoma, visiting his girlfriend, Sarah Harper. The two had been dating for 4 years. He was just visiting his girlfriend. He played baseball for East Central University. It's in a smaller city, Adna, Oklahoma. He's on a baseball scholarship. He was studying finance. Told his father he was thinking of staying in the United States after he finished his degree. This is a man who had a promising future. Killed by 3 apparent future street thugs, who now are apparently future jailbirds first. They're being tried as adults. But these 3 kids deserve to be treated like adults, yes. But there is still something wrong, something deeper. And again, how does this tie in? It's the same theme, because you can't tell me that Oklahoma, that's traditionally a very conservative state, that's been resistant against gun control and federal attempts at controlling guns, that there's not going to be a new outcry, that there's not going to be pressure put on from the Australian government. Why? Well, we already heard it. Obviously, there needs to be stricter gun control. Obviously, we're not doing enough to reach the youth in certain groups of people, in certain parts of our society. This is beyond tragic, ladies and gentlemen. This is on the realm of unfathomable. How have we come so far in our own culture that we have teenagers who think it's just fun to go randomly pick someone out at the park and shoot them with the attempt to kill? They wanted to kill somebody because they were bored. The video game isn't enough anymore. They wanted to do it for real. But politics will be played. Almost every one of these stories will be jumped on by folks on the left. Mark my words. In the meanwhile, that is it for today's show, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that you found it both somewhat entertaining, but mostly educational, and I certainly hope, well, informative, I should say. I hope you'll be with us again soon. This is Tim Tapp. Have a great rest of your evening, and hope we'll be back again soon. Good night, everybody.